Starting in listen-only mode.
Good evening. Welcome if you're joining us this evening. My name is Ant Lyons, founder of Your Property Network magazine. And tonight we'll be talking about HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, and how you can use HMOs to make genuinely life-changing returns. So this is a cash flow strategy. It's an income replacing strategy. One of probably only 2 or 3 strategies out there that you can use to create I'm going to use it in inverted commas, passive income, so a monthly income coming in without you having to trade your time for money. And I'm joined this evening by a very good friend of mine. We do a number of these webinars where I invite people on that I've got to know over the years in property. I get to understand their business models, what they're doing, and then we bring them on here so they can share their experience with you over the next hour or so. And it's probably going to be on here for about an hour, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how many questions that you have. So I'm going to introduce him now. So regular readers of YPM will be no stranger to his stories, to his tale, his background, and the strategies that he's adopted. He's got an amazing HMO business, and he's a really, really nice guy as well. So welcome this evening, Rick Gannon.
Thank you, and what a lovely welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Really looking forward to tonight's webinar, and thank you for having me.
Brilliant. It was great to have you online again, Rick. It's been a little while since we sort of picked up on one of these, and I was very privileged recently that Rick had me in his offices. That sounds particularly rude now I say it like that, but I came up for the day and we did a bit of a tour around some properties and got to understand the business. So these webinars are content heavy. Okay, so there's lots of information that we go through tonight. We really want you to make the best of it. So we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping whilst everyone joins us on the webinar this evening. We've had over 500 people register, so it's going to be a busy one this evening. Lots of questions, I'm sure. So first of all, hopefully you can hear me okay. I can't hear you. For the purposes of the webinar, you're muted. Because obviously if we had all 500 people talking at once, it would be a bit mayhem. However, you can communicate with us, you can ask us questions, you can ask us to go back a slide or clarify anything that you're not sure about. So there is a chat facility here, so you can ask any questions, and we see those directly, come straight to us, and I'll read them out, and perhaps even you might hear me tapping away sometimes as I answer people personally on the webinar tonight. So let's make sure that's working. So let's find out who you are. So please send us your name, whereabouts in the UK you are, and where you are in your HMO property journey. So it might be that you've got 1 or 2 single-let properties and they're just not really working for you anymore. You know, you need to create some real life-changing cash flow, create an actual property business rather than just long-term investments. Or maybe you're just starting out, maybe you've got a portfolio of 5, 10 HMO properties at the moment. So if you can message in now, let us know where you are in your HMO property journey, just to make sure that this chat facility is working and that you can hear me okay. Okay, great. Loads of you messaging, that's absolutely fantastic. Looks like quite a lot of you are sort of not necessarily at the beginning of your property journey, but towards the beginning of your HMO journey. So a number of you have got a couple of single-let properties, and just looking at HMOs, we've got 2 or 3 of you, got 2, 3, 4 HMOs. So, okay, what we're going to be covering tonight is just why you need them in your portfolio. We know that the tax situation on buy-to-let has changed, and what we really are examining tonight are sort of bulletproof income generating strategies that will protect your income against the tax man. So given the clause 24 stuff where mortgage finance interest is in some cases no longer allowable as an expense, we want to make sure that our properties are putting money in the bank every month. And we also want to make sure that we can, if we're starting, we want to find out from Rick tonight, is this a strategy you can do if you're starting out maybe with limited funds or even no money? How can you do it? And how do you get started if that's the case? And really, how do you begin to assess your area for HMOs? So loads to cover and lots of questions, I'm sure. I want to make sure you get the best out tonight, so please don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no such thing as a daft question. You know that if you're in a networking event, maybe with 100, 200 people in the room, you don't really want to put your hand up at the back, but it's just us that see these questions, so please don't be frightened to ask the questions tonight. If you're thinking it, I can guarantee another dozen or 2 dozen people will be thinking exactly the same. And I would recommend you've got a pen and paper with you. You make plenty of notes as we go along, because something might make perfect sense tonight, but then tomorrow or the day after or next week, you might be thinking, well, what was Rick saying about that? What was he talking about? Article 4 or financing? So make as many notes as you possibly can. So we're going to be on here for around about an hour this evening. Rick's here to kind of take you through the presentation, but I'm here to, I guess, help field the questions and ask the clarification and make sure things run as smoothly as possible. So we hope you're going to get the best out of tonight. So Rick, HMOs, hot topic for the last probably 6 or 8 years, really, but not without their challenges sometimes.
Well, that's right. You know, I mean, HMOs are shared houses, and they come with lots of different people with lots of different needs and wants. So I always say to people when we talk about HMOs that, you know, nothing's ever really 100% passive, and HMOs can be at times quite challenging, but, you know, the rewards are there. And, you know, the financial rewards, certainly at the end of each month, if you run a really good property portfolio and do it well, it's very, very rewarding. So yes, they come with challenges, but it's like anything, the more work you put in, then the more success, if you like, the more money that you can bring out of it.
Okay. So Rick, we're going to kind of hand over to you at this point. We've got dozens of questions coming in already. I guarantee we're going to answer as many of your questions as we can tonight. So don't feel I'm ignoring you now. I'm tapping away here, trying to answer a few of them now. But we will definitely make sure we cover your questions this evening. So.
Okay.
This is our slide, actually. So if you're new to webinars, if you're new to YPN, you don't know who we are or what we do, this is our magazine, Your Property Network magazine, launched by us. We are professional property investors ourselves, and it's the only magazine written by investors for investors. So we print and post over 12,000 copies of these a month now to readers around the UK. They're all people like you. Varying degrees of experience in their property journey. So some people are just starting out. We have some readers with over 500, even over 1,000 properties renting out. So we try and make sure the magazine has a little bit of everything for everybody in there. So it's packed with real life case studies, the like of which you're going to see this evening. We also have a team of sort of, I guess, we're property professionals. So my mortgage broker, my solicitor, my property tax consultant, my planning consultant, all those people write in the magazine as well. And as well as the magazine is kind of an online membership site. So as well as reading the magazine, you can listen to, I think we've got around about 200, maybe 250 hours worth of audio recordings of me interviewing property investors and the rest of my team as well. So it's kind of low cost, massive value. That's who we are. We really pride ourselves in bringing the very best in terms of content from successful property investors around the UK, and some of those people we handpick, like tonight, to talk you through their property businesses as we're doing with Rick this evening.
Thank you, Ant. So great, thank you. I want to just say a massive hello to everybody that's on the webinar this evening. As Ant said, that we do have over 500 people that have subscribed for this evening. So firstly, thank you all for giving up a couple of hours on your Monday night to listen to how I became successful with HMOs, and hopefully I can share some of that knowledge with everybody this evening. And there's already literally what looks like hundreds of questions in the questions tab. So I think what we'd like to do is probably towards the end of the webinar, we'll go through as many of the questions as we possibly can and try and cover most of them, but there are literally looks like hundreds already. So thank you very much. So tonight we're going to talk about HMOs and how to create life-changing returns from property using HMOs. So single lets, really, most of the people I see tonight have put in the toolbar to say that they've already got some single lets. They have been the mainstay in the traditional sort of buy-to-let portfolios. And there's actually nothing wrong with that, and it is really good bread and butter, but in the long run, single lets aren't really going to change your life in the next 12 months. So we invest personally in HMOs. So let's talk a little bit about what is a HMO. So a HMO stands for a house in multiple occupation, or houses of multiple occupancy. You may hear different terminology for the HMO, but it's a house in multiple occupation. And you may be confused because different people use the term to mean different things. So you may, the planning officer may refer to them as licensable HMOs, or which is a house occupied by more than 5 people over 3 or more floors. And some people may call them multi-let properties. So there's lots of different terminologies that we use. And the main thing that you need to know and you need to remember is that a HMO is really for 3 or more people from 2 separate families. So if you've got 3 or more people from 2 separate households, then that classifies a HMO. That's a HMO. And more than that, then we start to talk about licensing and planning. And we can't cover everything tonight, but we're going to give you a really good sort of in-depth look into why we invest in HMOs. So we have around 4 main tenant profiles. So we have students. So if you've got an area, or you're looking to invest in an area that has a university, then students probably would be a good way for you to start. And students come in all different shapes and sizes. Sometimes they can be a little bit hard to manage because they've fled the nest and they haven't been living on their own for too long, so they can take sometimes a little bit of looking after. But the great thing about students is that they park themselves up usually for 10 or 11 months, because they do get, obviously, you know, with the summer term, they get a little bit of time off, and most students then will leave the property during that period. So most of the time it's usually for about 10 months. But during that period, you will get your rent, and you don't have to move tenants in and out, so they're there for the long term. And if you ever struggle to get your rent paid by a student, then it just takes a little text message to mum or dad as a guarantor, and then usually we find that the money's in the bank within the next hour or so. So, you know, really good tenant demographic, but will only obviously work if you have a university in the area that you're looking to invest. The other thing as well that you need just to bear in mind, you need to contact the university to see how well they're doing in terms of numbers for students for the next academic year, if they're oversubscribed or undersubscribed. And some universities have started to provide second-year accommodation as well. And I know that certainly in Worcester, and I know there are some investors tonight in Worcester because I've seen the names pop up. So hi, it's Lynn, and Lynn's in Worcester tonight. I've seen that come up already. Certainly in Worcester, they are looking to provide second-year accommodation as well by building their own halls. So just got to be careful with all of that. That's, you know, all part of the due diligence process. The next tenant profile we look at are young professionals. Now, this is the tenant demographic that personally I choose and my company chooses, because Worcester, at the time of me investing, I thought was perhaps a little bit oversaturated with student HMOs, and we then decided to go for the young working professional market to plug that gap. So we target, I'll say target, it's probably not the right word, but we market to young working professionals, usually postgraduates, and people that have come away now from university and they're in their first or second year of their professional life. So they've come away from the student house, they realize now they need to knuckle down a little bit and go into the professional side of things. So that's our sort of tenant demographic, and it works really well. The only sort of downside I can say with that is that the turnover with young professionals is going to be a lot higher than with students. So we probably turn our rooms around every 6 to 8 months. And there's a reason behind that, because if the young professionals are postgraduates and they're on a graduate scheme from university, then usually the company that employ them like them to move around to different offices around the country as part of their graduate scheme. So every 6 months or so, then they would leave and they would go and work in another branch for that company, which means then we have to fill the rooms. Now, we don't only do postgraduates. We also do white collar professional workers. So, you know, anybody that has got a white collar job, as we call it. So that would be police officers, accountants, lawyers, that kind of thing, and it works really, really well for us. And then we've got, of course, working sharers. So although we do mainly market to white collar young professionals, we also have one particular property that works really well for working people. So I mean, I kind of call them blue collar. I don't like putting people into boxes, but these are the blue collar type of workers. So we've got a lot of people that are in the care industry that live in that particular property, and people that are working but they don't have a degree and they haven't been to college or university. So we've got one particular property that works really well for that in the city centre. And then of course you've got your LHA, so your local housing authority tenants. And we personally, we don't target that particular market because there's lots of things that you need to consider with local housing authority tenants, because they generally don't work and they look for housing benefit. There are a few things that you need to be aware of, and one of which is that you will be at the mercy of the housing benefits team, and if the tenant makes a mistake on their form or for whatever reason doesn't declare something they should do, then the likelihood is that the housing benefit will be stopped, which means you won't get paid. The other thing you need to consider with local housing authority tenants is the likelihood is they're going to be in the property most of the day because they don't work. So the bills are going to be a lot higher if you do all-inclusive bills, and the fact that they're in the property together all day, sometimes they can fall out. So they are a lot harder to manage, and this is only from my own experience, and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to sort of stereotype different tenant demographics, so I can only really talk from my own experience. And I find that young professionals and working sharers for us works a lot better because they are less maintenance than the other form of demographics such as local housing authority, etc. So they've all got their own different attributes and you can choose whichever you want to. But I think my advice would be, if you are just starting out and if you're not an experienced landlord or landlady, then I think really LHA probably wouldn't be a start out tenant demographic for you, because I think you may find it just a little bit tricky.
I love the way you delicately put that there, Rick. So
I'm trying to be diplomatic. I mean, when I stand on stage and I talk about this kind of thing, I'm perhaps a little bit more direct, but I am trying to be a little bit political with that, because I mean, sometimes by virtue of tenants being normal people, and sometimes they will lose their job. So by default, then sometimes a tenant may become an LHA tenant through no fault of their own. So then, of course, we need to house them. We need to make sure that we're still looking after them. We can't physically just kick them out because they've lost their job. So we need to try and work with them, and hopefully they'll get another job quite quickly very soon afterwards. But I think really from my own experience and being from a police background, I don't mind telling everybody that my experience of HMOs when I was a police officer was obtaining warrants and then knocking the door down to arrest people for drug dealing and prostitution. And that was because it was the tenant demographic that was, sort of the local housing authority, etc., that were living in those properties. So I like to give everybody, everybody can choose their own tenant demographic. But I think if you're working for yourself, the benefit, or one of the benefits from that, is that you can call the shots because you're in charge. So why make things harder when there is an easier option to make more, if more money than you would do if you'd chosen to go down the LHA route? Just from my own experience, Ant, really.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got my fair share of LHA tenants in single lets. I think the other thing that kind of dictates which market you're going to go for is where you are in the country as well. So, and I've got a number of HMOs down in Plymouth. Now, Plymouth's a really big university town, so I've got quite a number of student HMOs, and they definitely work probably a little bit better than the sort of blue collar worker ones that I've got, because students come in at a certain time of the year, they leave at a certain time of the year. It's all quite predictable in terms of the pattern. So, have a look at where you are, what's the market like, and assess, who am I going to be renting to, which best suits me, I guess is the other side of it, isn't it, Rick?
Yes, absolutely, and you're very right. If you've got a single let portfolio, you'll find probably more often than not, if you've got LHA tenants in a single let, then that's completely different, because you've got one family living together and they will probably stay for an awful long time. So they will be great tenants for a single let. But tonight we're talking about HMOs, and when you do a HMO with local housing authority tenants, things can change quite quickly, and it can become quite hard to manage. So, but yes, Ant's absolutely right. So let's look at single lets versus multi lets and see what the good points and the bad points are. So with single lets, there are lower barriers to gain entry, and they're often smaller properties and cheaper. When we say lower barriers, there's a lot less legislation with single lets. Most of the time, dependent on where you are in the country, they don't need to be licensed. So there's a lot less really to think about with a single let property. They're cheaper, which means that potentially you don't have to do a really expensive refurb, and they are cheaper to buy anyway because they're smaller properties. So they're really easy to finance on a buy-to-let mortgage for a single let, and they are a lot lower maintenance because you've usually only got one family living in there. And as we just covered, if you find the right tenant, they might stay for 20 years or more. Now, we've got tenants that have been in because we do have single lets as well, and we've had tenants in for at least 7 or 8 years. Now, I've only met them once, and that was when they moved into the property. I've spoken to them via email several times since, but they pay their rent every month. Everything's good. But the bad side of things really is that we don't get as much income. So from that particular property, I don't mind sharing that we don't have a big mortgage on it. So the mortgage is almost paid off on that house. But if we did have a mortgage on it, then our profit on that house would be less than £200 a month for a £200,000 property. The other issue is with single lets. If the tenant leaves or the family leaves, then you've lost all of your income, because they will pay, obviously, as a family rather than as individual people. So then you've got a void, and you've got to then find money to cover your mortgage. So the other side of the fence, and the multi-lets or HMOs, the pros on the HMOs, well, you can make massive profits. So, with a HMO property, you can be more creative when you buy the deal. So a lot of people have probably heard of rent to rents and lease purchase options and exchange with delayed completions and things like that. And we've done all of those, and they do work really, really well. So you can make a lot more money out of multi-lets than single lets. The cons of multi-lets are they are a lot more hands-on, and they will take a lot more management. Now, whether you choose to manage the portfolio yourself, or whether you want to send it to an external company, a letting agent or a property manager to do for you, you will have a certain level of involvement with your property, because they are a lot more complex than single lets. The purchase price may be, not always, but maybe higher because it's probably a bigger property, or if you're already buying a property that's been converted to a HMO, then you might have to pay a little bit more for it for that reason. And they can be more complex to finance. So we don't buy HMOs with buy-to-let mortgages because that's not the correct product. So we don't do that. We don't teach that either. So you do have to have the correct product, which comes in with a lot more stress testing, etc. So there are, pros and cons to both models, but let's look at the difference in the cash flow, folks. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the cash flow and how much money we can make out of these properties and do it well to a high standard. So with a 4-bedroom single let property, the rent on this, on an average single let price, would be about £950 a month. And we're looking at the mortgage, and we base this on a 70% loan to value. So that means that the bank will lend 70% and you'd have to put 30% deposit down. So that's £583. The insurance, and these are a lot of the things sometimes people forget to include. So insurance on the property would be around about £25 a month. And then if you're going to put this under management, you need to pay the agency fees, which of course are £95 a month. And we're going to budget here for voids as well, because at some point you are more than likely going to have voids in your portfolio. So we take out £95 for voids. Really important one that a lot of people miss here is maintenance. So it's always really important you factor in your maintenance costs as well. And on a single let property, your maintenance is likely to be lower. So we put £50 a month in for maintenance, and your gas checks and your electric checks and your fire checks, etc., would be about £10 a month. So that means from this property, you're going to cash flow £91.67 a month net. And that's after you've paid all your bills. Now, that's not a huge amount of money, but let's look at this property. If we could repurpose
Rick, I was just going to,
yeah.
sorry to jump in. I mean, I've literally been doing my year-end accounts actually today and over a couple of days last week, and your figures tally exactly with mine. So I would say a good single let property, one that's kind of performing quite well, might make £200 a month, might make, but that will probably be the best one. You know, generally speaking, I think they make somewhere between £80 and £150 a month after all the costs. And I think your maintenance cost, I always factor in 1 month's rent for the annual maintenance. So it's really easy for that profit figure to disappear on a single let. That's not to say they're not great long-term wealth building as a strategy, really good for a long-term investment, but they're not going to get you out of the day job fast. I mean, do the maths. How many of these at £91 a month would you need to have? I mean, if you want to earn 10 grand a month, you're going to have more than 100 of these single let properties. So we can see they're not a route to income fast, are they?
No, that's right. And we buy for cash flow. So when we buy HMOs or when we take them over, it's the cash flow that we're looking for. If we get future growth, then that's great. That's the cream on the cake, you know, but we can't really predict that. I mean, we like to think that the property market goes up, you know, year on year. And I think the statistics state that every 10 years, the property sort of doubles in value on average at 9.7 years or something similar. But we can't guarantee that because nobody can predict the future. So we buy for cash flow. And if the property goes up over the next 5 to 10 years, and even better. So yeah, absolutely right. And if you do get one void, or if you do get maybe a boiler that breaks down, then that £91 a month is going to be wiped out completely. But if you look at the multi-let example, now this is based on, you know, a similar property. So you could buy or you could rent a 4-bedroom house and convert it, if you can, with building regs and planning permission if you need it, to a 5-bedroom property. Now, sometimes all that would be is converting the living room into a bedroom by putting a bed in. So you don't need planning permission to do that. So you can convert a 4-bedroom to a 5-bedroom if it's large enough inside, and if the rooms are compliant to the minimum room sizes, and if you've got a communal area. But the communal area could be a kitchen. So if you've got a large kitchen, then you could put a table in there and the television as well and turn that into a communal area. Then you could repurpose the living room into a bedroom, and that would give you more cash flow each month. So let's look at a 5-bedroom example on a multi-let property. So the rent on this is £2,125 a month. So you can see already that's a significant increase on the single let property. And we're going to base it on the same. So the mortgage at 70%. Now we put 70%, you might get more. But what I like to do, and when we teach HMO strategy, is err on the side of caution. And, you know, we'll look at the worst case scenario rather than trying to tell people that they will get 85% loan to value, which would be even better because you wouldn't have to put as much money down as a deposit. So we're going to use 70% loan to value. So the mortgage is going to be the same because it's the same house. So that's £583. Your other bills are going to be slightly higher. So we do all-inclusive HMOs. So we pay the council tax, we pay the TV license for the communal area, the water, the gas, and the electric, and the Wi-Fi. So all of that altogether comes to, you know, an awful lot more than it would do for the single let. So that's about £475 a month. That's probably a little bit high, you know, depending on the area you live in, and that will depend on the council tax that you pay as as well. Management fees. So we base this on just over 10% for management fees. If you choose to, if you don't want to put it under management, then you don't have to pay that £200 a month, and you can put that in the bank. Voids, then we're looking at £100 a month for voids, and maintenance in a multi-let is going to be a little bit higher. So we're looking at £100 a month for maintenance. And again, the gas and electric checks will be the same. So if you look at the difference now between the two on the same property, well, this example, cash flows at £656 a month against £91 a month for the single let. So you can see the difference in the two of them, and that's why we invest in HMOs. So if you had a property, I mean, Ant's just touched on this. So if you had a portfolio of single let properties and they're all creating about £100 a calendar month, then how many would you need to replace your income of 50,000? Well, of course, you'd need 50 properties. And how long would that take you to accumulate? And don't forget, if you're going to buy 50 properties, you need 50 deposits. So with multi-lets, then the properties are much more efficient, the cash flow is better, it's stronger, and your returns will be a lot quicker, which would enable you to, if you're looking to give up your job, to give up your job a lot quicker. So I'm going to give you a couple of case studies shortly on some properties that both create huge returns, but they're both on very different sides of the spectrum. So the first property I'm going to show you is the very first HMO that we purchased. And then the last case study is going to be the very last property that we purchased, which was in December just gone. And the two very, very different. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. And thank you to Ant who introduced me earlier. But it's a little bit more about me. So you know who it is that's talking to you and what my credentials are. So I actually began investing in single lets in 1997, and we became accidental landlords. So at the time I was working in finance, bizarrely, and we had a property that I got promoted, and we put the property on the market. We couldn't sell it, unfortunately. I don't know why. It was a new build, so it was quite inflated in price at that time. So we were fortunate enough, myself and my wife Lorraine, that we both had good jobs. So we were able to get a second mortgage to buy another property and rent our first house out. So really by default, we became accidental landlords. And then after a couple of years, I decided that I wanted to own a chain of pubs. Now, don't ask me why, bit bizarre, but we bought one pub, and then that kind of escalated, and over a period of about 3 years, we ended up with 6 pubs, clubs, hotels, restaurants, and gastro pubs, if you like. And we got approached by a very large company who asked to buy 2 of the units from us at really, massive sums of money, into the millions. And we accepted, and we sold 2. We kept 1, and the others we just closed because they were leases, so we gave them back. So we did that, and then I decided then that I wanted to fulfill another childhood ambition, and I wanted to join the police. So quite late on in years, I suppose, I decided then that I needed to fulfill my ambition, otherwise I'd be too old to join. So I decided to join West Midlands Police, and I became a police officer, and I was a police officer for about 13 years, and I was always operational response, so I was on the front line for the whole of my service. And I haven't got time to go into my full story tonight, but over the time I was in the police, when I joined, we didn't have children, and my wife and I eventually we tried for children, and we had our first son, Ben. And Ben came along, and unfortunately Ben was born with brain damage, and he's got a condition called quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means that he can't use his legs at all and is confined to a wheelchair. So when that happened, it kind of knocked the wind out of our sails. And I remember having a very poignant conversation with my son Ben after a night shift, and that really was the paradigm shift for me, because I realized at that point that we're not here twice, we're only here once, and we need to make the best out of the situations that we've got, and we owe it to our children to be able to care for them in the best way we can. Now in the police, I was working shifts, I was working nights, and I was working weekends, so I didn't have a lot of time to spend with my family. So at that point I decided that it's time to make a change, and this is several years ago now, and I decided to take a career break from the police and go back into what I knew to do, which was property. So we began investing then very heavily in HMOs. And very quickly, within the first 6 months, I replaced my income in the police. So I was able then to resign completely from the police. And then over the period of the next 6 months, I think I quadrupled my income. So in the first 11 months, we managed to get £8,400 a month net profit from HMOs. Now, to put it into context, I was earning about £1,800 take home a month as a police officer, as a qualified sergeant. Now, that's with stoppages and pensions and bits to charity, but I was actually taking home £1,800 a month. So going from £1,800 a month to 8,000, and then we have joint venture partners we have to pay back at that point. So my net profit per month with the first 11 months was £7,000, which we created from a standing start with none of our own money, because we had no money out either to start investing. So we'll talk about sort of investing strategies a little bit later. So then from there, I got invited to be a coach and a mentor for Simon Zutchi's mastermind program, and I did that for about 18 months. So that's a little bit about me and where I've come from, and I hope people can sort of look at that and sort of motivate themselves to say that they can do it too, because it's all about taking action and following a proven strategy and having the right people around you to help you with your journey.
So, Rick, I was just going to say, for the people who sort of might have missed you saying that to create this from a standing start, you didn't have a lump sum of capital to bring to this. You weren't, you haven't sort of set aside some life savings of several £100,000. You did have to, really start from scratch with very limited or almost zero capital. I'm guessing that makes it harder in some ways, but at the same time, I always think sometimes if you're starting out with a sum of money, that almost limits what you can achieve, because you think, oh, I've just got this amount to spend. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do agree with that, and it's all back to what we say is about your reason why. So you need to have a really strong reason why to succeed. Now, I was in the police. I did take a career break, which meant that I could go back if I wanted to, but I wasn't earning any money. We didn't have any money in the bank. We had no savings at all. So we kind of went into going into HMOs with our eyes wide open, knowing the risks, but I needed to make it work within the first 12 months. Otherwise, I would have had to have gone back into the police. So my reason was for the family and for my son, Ben, and for my daughter, Charlotte. I didn't want to go back into being a police officer. I wanted to make that step change and push forward. So we did start with zero capital, but we managed to build that portfolio in 11 months to get that net profit without using any of our own money, by inviting people from our network to joint venture with us, or by inviting people from our network to lend us money on a loan basis for a really good return. So that's how we built our portfolio from scratch. And to a large degree, that's how we do it now. But I don't want to sort of ruin the case studies, but it's slightly different now the way we do it, because we are looking now at very different deals, because we've grown so much and the portfolio now is doing so well. But I want to just sort of tell everybody out there that don't worry about not having any money. If you have, then that's fine. You can use that, you can set that against some properties, but at some point it's probably going to run out. And I don't know how many houses you would need to replace your income, but I've always say, and I'll prove this again when I go through the case study, that if you've got a good deal, and it is genuinely a good deal, then you'll always find the money.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rick. I really think that if you're hungry for it, if you want to make it work for you, then you will make sure that you go out there and you source the funds. That money is out there. It is possible to do it, and it's definitely easier to accelerate your business by using other people's money, alternative sources of finance.
Absolutely, and I think if I can just if I go back sort of 3 years or more, and I think one of the not regrets, but perhaps I would do things differently now, that I got a little bit when I realised how I'm not going to say easy, that's not the right word, but how successful I started to become. I perhaps became a little bit greedy, and when people started to present themselves to me and ask if they could come into the deal with 50%, so that means they would come in and give 50% of the money needed to secure that property, I said no. But what I would do is I'd lend that money off them, and I'd give them a good return, and then I owned all of the deal rather than just half of it. But if I'd have invited more partners in at an earlier stage, then the portfolio probably would have grown a lot quicker, and I may have more properties now than I do if I'd have adopted that strategy. So I kind of, I'm not sure I was greedy, but I wanted to sort of keep everything for myself because I was doing it for my family. So I think now we've learned by that, and if it is a really good deal, then we will always invite partners in to help fund it with us, because it means we can grow faster, we can move quicker, you know, when we've got cash there waiting in the bank. So a little bit of a point out there for everybody, because I know sometimes you think, well, you know, I want it all to myself. Sometimes it's not the way. Sometimes it's a lot easier to bring people in. But yes, absolutely, if the deal is good, and if the returns are good, then yeah, the money is absolutely there. There is money everywhere, and I think, Ant, as well, you know, you're doing some great deals as well at the moment, so you're testament to that too.
Yeah, we raised some money over the weekend for a large development that we've got going on, and we raised £1 million in £1 million and 50,000 £1,050,000, however you say that number, in just a shade under 24 hours, which is, you know, I mean, it's amazing. That's a big number. That's a big number.
But that's, you know, I mean, that really stops people in their tracks to say that, of course, there's money out there, and yes, you can fund the deals. It's knowing how to do it. I get that, you know, but we can help people do that, and it is knowing who to go to. And, you know, very similarly, I mean, I'll come on to it in a second when we do the case studies, but we raised a huge amount of money in one phone call, you know, to fund our last deal, and it was just literally one phone call to one person who was part of my network, and we did the deal. So, you know, the money is there, it absolutely is there, but it's got to be the right deal. So if everybody's thinking, I can't do this, I don't have the money to do it, we can teach you the strategies and help you find the people that matter to help you go ahead and either buy or lease or rent your HMO properties to at least get you started. So yeah, absolutely. I would like to share my very first case study with everybody. Now, this is the very first HMO that I purchased, and that's a photograph of me on the left, in case anybody doesn't know me. And the chappie on the right is actually the vendor's son. And I went through a little phase at the beginning of investing of taking photographs of every deal that we did. Got bored of that quite quickly afterwards. But so this is a property. I want to just give you a few ins and outs on what happened with this. So we actually, when I say we, myself and my wife, we sourced this from an estate agent. So we actually found it, I think it was on Rightmove or Zoopla, one of them. And that's another way that, you know, a lot of people say, well, you can't find good deals through agents. Well, you absolutely can. And I can share probably 4 or 5 of those, but tonight we've only got time for one. So we bought this property for $187,000. Now, at the time, we did things the wrong way, and we put an offer in, it was accepted, and then we thought, we've got no money, what are we going to do? How are we going to fund it? And I kind of really don't like doing that. We don't do that anymore. But at this point, we did. So we then went to our network and we looked for a joint venture partner. Now, I'm kind of going against what I said earlier, because this is the very, this at the beginning stages of our career with HMOs was the only property that we bought with a partner. After this one, we only then did deals with investors. So this partner was actually a family member. So we approached a family member who had recently retired, and he had a pension, a lump sum, and the pension wasn't getting any return really in the bank. It was doing really poorly. So we asked him if he'd like to come in on this deal, and he agreed. So the joint venture partner put all of the money in for the purchase of the property, all of the legals, and the full refurbishment cost. The deal was at that time, it's changed slightly now, that I managed and sourced all of the tenants. and we both get 50% of the profit and 50% of the capital growth. So the numbers on this property, we purchased it and we managed to get a 75% loan to value mortgage. So at this time, when we bought it, to do it up, we got a 75%. Now at the moment, I mean, the more experience you can get 85% products now on HMO products. So really depends on where you are on your journey. So at this time we needed £46,750 deposit. The refurb, now we managed to do this for £20,000. Now it is going back a while, and that was to include an installation of a new bathroom as well. I don't think we'd be able to do that now. I think, you know, times have changed slightly, but the refurb cost at that time was £20,000. The stamp duty was before we had to pay for the second property stamp duty, so that was only £1,500. That's changed now. The legals were £1,000. So the total joint venture money in on this deal was 69,000, so just shy of 70 grand. So it was a 5-bedroom property already, and then we just repurposed the living room, and we put a bed in the living room to turn it into a bedroom, and we also had a dining room as well, so that became the living room. So we turned it into a 6-bedroom property really easily. At the time, we were getting around about £361 per room. That's gone up quite a lot now. So then it was £2,166 per month in rent. The voids and the maintenance, we factored in 15%. So we factored 10% for voids and 5% for maintenance, which comes to £324 a month. The mortgage and the bills, etc., were coming to about £1,000 a month. So altogether, we were spending about £1,324 a month, which gave us £841, 10 pence per month profit. So if we split that 50-50, I just generated an income of £420 a month from thin air, if you like. I had to put the work in, but it didn't cost me any money. And I also had 50% of the equity. So at that point then, our joint venture partner was achieving 7.3% return. Now, you might say, well, that's not massive, and that's correct. It's not, but it was an awful lot better than what he was achieving at the time, which is 1.5% in the bank. And I think you struggle probably to get that now. So the joint venture partner also got 50% of any capital growth in the property. And what happened, now it says will, now we refinanced this deal about 2 years later, and we got a staggering £280,000 refinance on this property in 2 years, which meant that the joint venture partner had all of his money back, every penny, and we had about £10,000 on top as well in equity. So it meant that the property cost us zero, cost us nothing, and we've both got an infinite return on our money now. So we still, because the rents have gone up, we still achieve about £400 a month each from this house, but because we refinanced it and the property shot up in value, then it didn't cost us anything at all. So we've both now got an infinite return on investment. And that was our very, very first deal. So we've got half a house that didn't cost us anything, and £400 a month each that didn't cost us anything to get, if you like, almost. So that was the first deal. And when we did that, I thought, wow, you know, this is real. This is absolutely an amazing strategy. And we then just carried on really trying to emulate similar deals, but by excluding, as I said earlier, joint venture partners and just taking investors, which also worked for us, but we kind of didn't grow as quickly as we could have done. Now, the other bit of the icing on the cake, my joint venture partner on this deal, when the £80,000 or £70,000, sorry, that he invested came back into the bank, he said, well, I don't want it really, because it's going to go back in the bank and earn me maybe 0.5% or slightly more. Would you like it back, Rick? So he offered it back to me at a great return, which is more than he was getting at the bank, which I've then been able to reuse going forwards to fund probably another 2 deals. So that one deal has kind of made me 3 houses. So a really good case study to begin with, I think, Ant.
Yeah, it's a great one. Nicola asked just now, why would your JV partner, before we looked at this slide, why would they want to fund this, put in all the money just to get half the profit? And I think this has answered it, really, looking at this slide, that you can see that your partner gets, bank busting returns. Right now, you probably get 0.5% for money in the bank. There's an awful lot of savers out there whose money really is being eroded by keeping it in the bank. They are looking for alternatives. The British public, we are in love with property. We can't get over that. Most people understand the whole concept behind bricks and mortar and renting a property out on a room by room basis. They might not want to do the work themselves. They might not understand the market. They might want to partner with someone who does the legwork and get these kind of returns. So I hope it makes sense, Nicola. I hope that's kind of answered it for you and many of the other people sort of watching out there. There are lots of people out there, they want to invest. Maybe they don't have the time or the inclination or the experience to be doing it themselves, so they want to partner with someone with a bit more experience, maybe the time and the energy to go out there and source the deals. I think I've probably interviewed maybe 500 investors over the last 9 years on both sides of the fence there. So those investing money, those borrowing funds for projects, quite often I interview both the parties and see how it works for them. So these people are out there. I promise you they're there. You do need to tie into a network. So we're going to give some advice on that a little later on as well. So Rick, are we looking at another case study in a second?
Yes, we are. And just to sort of come on to that point, yeah, you're absolutely right. And for the question, why would they put all the money in? I think the slide that's on the screen now probably does answer that. If my partner hadn't put the money in that deal, then they would probably be kicking themselves right now, because now they've got half a house for free. So, there are loads of different reasons, as Ant just said. But initially, my partner was getting 7.3% from me on the money that he was only getting 1.5% in the bank. So worked really well. So that brings me on to my latest deal. So we've got both sides of the equation here, really. So from my first deal to my latest deal. So this is our latest deal. When I say latest, we completed on this 2 days before Christmas last year, after about 6 to 8 months due diligence. So we bought the whole street, basically. Now, I think this photo doesn't really do it that much justice, because it is the whole street. So it's everything that you see there plus another 2 properties. And the purchase price on this property was 1.1 million. And it consists of 28 flats over 4 individual properties. It's an old school that was converted in 1954, I think. We bought it fully occupied with 28 tenants, and it cash flows £9,000 a month. That's gross, okay? But £9,000 a month gross, with just under £5,000 a month net profit. So that's the other side of the spectrum. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the background on the property. We approached the owners of this property about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, and they came back and said, yes, I will sell it to you, but we want £1.3 million for it. And at that time, we weren't in a position to move forward, unfortunately. So we parked it and we put it in our follow-up file. And about a year ago, we picked the follow-up back up and just gave them a call and said, look, is the property still for sale? And they said, well, actually, yes, it is. So we've dropped the price slightly. We want 1.2 million for it. And we sort of did some umming and ahhing. And they said, well, be quick, because we're about to put it on the market with an agent. So we went away and we did some figures, and it took us quite a while to put the deal together. And by the time we got back to the owner, they'd actually put it on the market with an agent, which is okay. It didn't really matter to us so much. So we went to the agent and we started the negotiation process, and we put an offer in of 1.1 million, and they didn't accept it to begin with, but then about 3 or 4 weeks later, they came back to us and they accepted the offer. So what we did, we split the titles, because it was all on one title. So we split the titles on purchase, which the owners paid for, which left us with 28 flats. Not all of them on separate titles, but the individual houses were split onto separate titles. And we've got a massive plot of land on the back and 14 garages and car parking spaces in the city centre. So what a great deal. So let's look at the numbers a little bit on this. How much did it cost us? Nothing. And we talk about, if you get a good deal, you will find the money. Well, it didn't cost us anything. So I made one phone call, and that one phone call got the money to put in as a joint venture partner, to put into the deal with the deposit, and then we funded the rest on mortgages. So we funded about 700,000 on mortgages, and our joint venture partner put the deposit in. So We split the titles, and then we can now, to raise our money back out of the property, there's lots of different things we can do. I don't want to go into every scenario, but there's a couple of here. We can split the titles of the individual flats and decorate them, and then revalue them and refinance them individually as individual units to get all of our deposit money back out. Or we could develop we could develop the back, and we are at the moment looking for plans to do some development on the back in order to get our deposit money back out. And of course, we've got the freehold of the property as well, which we could sell to an investment company for about £100,000. There's a big chunk of the money there as well. And then we'll have a £1.1 million block that cost us absolutely nothing. So that's the two different sort of scenarios, and from where we came from a 6-bedroom HMO to a 28-bedroom street, which we own now, and both of them we haven't used any of our own money to buy.
Now, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It's very unlikely that if you've got no property experience and perhaps not a huge amount of business experience, this one is probably not going to be your first deal. We need to be realistic about that, but that doesn't say that this isn't the sort of property that you shouldn't be aiming at. I mean, it's really interesting actually that this end of the market, the kind of £1 million properties, the bigger projects, there are a lot fewer people competing for those kinds of deals. There might be one or two other interested parties, and that's it. Now, if you compare that to all those people out there watching Homes Under the Hammer that are looking for, a 2-bed house, a 3-bed house that they can do up and rent, there's hundreds of people competing in that end of the market. So I think it's a real case of, this might not be your first deal, but 2, 3, 4, 5 deals in, there's no reason that you can't be looking at these ones. And these really are the case of one property deal. One good property deal can set you up for life. It can replace far more than the average salary. It can, sometimes they can replace a 6-figure income. So, this is the potential. And HMOs, I mean, we started off talking about, 4 or 5-bed houses that we rented on a room by room basis. And we've, in under an hour, we've accelerated into 28 flats. And, sometimes an HMO isn't all these separate rooms. Sometimes it might be a number of different flats that you rent out on a room by room basis or as separate flats. So you've got different exit strategies. So it really is testament to what can be achieved. So I'm going to ask Rick a particularly nosy question now, because that's kind of my job. So Rick, we know where you were after 11 months of sort of full-time in property. You'd created the sort of £6,000 a month income. Where are you now in property?
It is a very good question, Ant, because it forever changes. All I can tell you is that last year my business turned over about £500,000 from a standing start. In terms of rent, our rent roll per month now gross is about £40,000 a month.
Okay, fantastic. So, and let's talk about some of the challenges along the way, because HMOs are not without their challenges. Quite a few people asked early on, saying, is the HMO market getting saturated? Are too many people doing HMOs now? And I think that's a brilliant question, actually, because there's been a huge amount of talk about it over the last, say, 6 or even 8 years. And down in Plymouth, where I've got quite a lot of property, we definitely have seen the market change, and the student market has changed. So, Rick, perhaps if we hear your thoughts, first of all, is the HMO market reaching saturation?
I think it is a really good question, and without a shadow of a doubt, it's a great strategy. There are more people doing it now than perhaps there were 5 years ago, because people have realised the benefits that bring from having a HMO portfolio. But the one thing I do have to say is that what we're doing here is we're creating opportunities. So we're creating an opportunity to house 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in a large property, then giving them the opportunity to live on their own, have their independence for a fraction of the cost that it would cost them to have a studio apartment or a flat or a house. Some of these people, if not most of these people, can't yet get on the housing market. So we're creating massive opportunities for lots and lots of different people. Now, we're not building any more land. So, you know, we're always going to have a housing shortage in the UK. We are an island. It's an ever increasing population, and we haven't got any more land to build. So I think that the HMO strategy, albeit the legislation has changed, it is harder to do now than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. But if we do it well and we do it right, and we stay above the competition and make sure that our properties are the best in the market, then we're going to future-proof our model. And I personally believe that the HMO strategy isn't going anywhere, and it's always going to be a very good structure for a very good, profitable business.
I agree. I mean, in Plymouth, we've seen the student market's changed a lot because there's been lots of purpose-built student blocks around, and what's happened is that squeezed the student market, in particular the marginal properties, so the ones that aren't in a great area, or perhaps they're not that nice inside, you know, the landlords don't take that good care of them. That end of the market has kind of been pushed down, so people are competing on price. Where we have seen things you know, buck that trend, and where have you got kind of premium property, premium location, really nice finish, places that people genuinely want to live, not necessarily the places where they think, oh, I'm going to have to live in this place. So they aspire to live in those places. They don't mind sharing a house. They've come from, you know, if it's a student property, obviously that's what they're used to doing. If they're sort of young professionals, they come from university, they're used to sharing houses. It's quite a sociable atmosphere to live with a bunch of other young people, and they get to live in really nice properties and have really, really nice rooms within those. So I definitely think there's a kind of drive towards quality, and of course it depends on your area. This is where you're going to need to do a bit of due diligence. You need to start to understand your area, what's happening there, and sometimes the areas that work really well are not always the really, really obvious areas. I mean, I know I live about 25 minutes from Bristol, and it can work really well there, but it's also very competitive. Lots of people trying to go into the HMO market. And Rick, you're in an area of the country which probably for many is not that obvious to think about.
Well, yeah, and it's all about the due diligence, isn't it? And I think, you know, the first thing that I ever tell anybody to do is pick your area and pick it carefully. Now, I invest in Worcester. When I started investing, I mean, Worcester's not huge, it is a city, but it's not a very big city. We do have a university. It's not a massive university. But because when I started investing in HMOs, I wanted to take the whole world on, and I wanted to invest anywhere. And very fortunately for me, I was grounded quite quickly, because the first property that came along was in fact in Worcester. And then I realized how much effort I needed to put into this business. So I needed to keep the portfolio as close to me as possible. So I think that, you know, the closer you are to your portfolio is always going to be a benefit. Worcester probably wasn't the first area that we chose, and we knew that we were going to have Article 4 looming as well. And when we started investing, we didn't have that. But now Worcester is very, very difficult to invest into because of additional licence and Article 4. But it works really well. But it's all about the supply and demand, and, you know, making sure that, you know, you've got the right area, you're close to public transport links. If you've got a good city centre, try and stay as close to the city as you can. If it's a university area and you're looking for students, obviously the closer to the university you can get, you know, the better. But it is very area specific. But I have actually tested the market a little bit over the last few years, and we've kind of gone into, I live in Malvern, and we do now have a couple of HMOs in Malvern as well. Now, Malvern is in the middle of nowhere. It's not in the city centre. We're not close, particularly where the properties are. They're not very close to the station, but bizarrely, they're always full. So I wouldn't go, you know, any more than the two we've got right now, but we did try and test that market just to see if it would work, and have worked really well. But yeah, absolutely, it's all about location.
Okay, fab. Now look, I'm going to just for a couple of minutes, I'm going to do a couple of, we've had some really good questions come in, so we're going to do a quick fire round of questions, if that's okay. So we'll kind of cover one at a time, maybe, if that's okay. So let's have a look. So Russell's just asked, how do HMOs compare with serviced accommodation as a strategy? It's a really good question. Serviced accommodation has been a buzzword for the last 18 months, and that's definitely, absolutely, definitely a property sector that is just exploding now. However, I would say, and I don't know if Rick will back me up on this, we'll find out in a second, HMOs are definitely less effort than serviced accommodation. So whilst you need to be systemised in HMO, if you're going to be running a serviced accommodation business, you're going to need to be highly systemised, okay? There's also fewer things to get wrong with HMOs than there are with serviced accommodation. So I'll give you one really, really quick example. I know lots of people, they go into serviced accommodation, they start looking at apartment blocks in the centre of town, without knowing that in the terms of the lease that have been drawn up for those apartments, it actually prohibits short-term letting. So if you were to use your one of those properties for service accommodation, you'd actually be in breach of the terms of the lease. In the very worst circumstances, they can take that property back off of you. You also need the correct insurances in place. You need the correct finance in place, and finance for service accommodations is, whilst it is out there, it's very much in its infancy phase. So if you're looking at the complexity side of things, then whilst HMOs are more complicated than single-let properties, then nowhere near as complicated as serviced accommodation. Rick, do you think I've got that in a nutshell?
Absolutely, and I think we've missed a key point here as well, is planning permission. So I mean, Ant's just mentioned, you've got to look at when you buy a flat, or if you take a flat on a rent to rent on a management agreement, you always need to look at the head lease. So you look at the head lease and see what restrictions or covenants or any wording that might be in there that would prevent you from using it as commercial property or a shared property or a serviced accommodation unit. So you've got to take into consideration that to begin with. Secondly, serviced accommodation requires planning class usually C1, which is short-term holiday let. And most properties you will take will be planning class C3, which is normal house, dwelling house. So you've got to consider that as well. Will you be breaching planning? And if it is in a block, and if it is in a block of flats or an apartment block, you've also got to consider the neighbours. And if you are renting to groups of people and they're coming and going all the time, sometimes maybe there'll be parties going on in the property. You've got to consider that as well. So yes, to answer your question, I think, yeah, you can potentially make better returns with serviced accommodation. However, you've got to take all the above into consideration. Now, I don't specialise in serviced accommodation, albeit we do have 2 units, and I can tell you that you are operating a remote hotel. That's what you're doing, and you need to have all of those systems in place for your check-in procedure, for your cleaning, to make sure that if you've got a turnaround on the same day, you need someone to go in, you need to clean it to hotel standard, and you need to make sure that then it's ready for your next tenant to check in. So you need systems for that, you need a booking system. So it can be, in my experience, more complicated than running a HMO. And we mentioned earlier that HMOs can be quite labour intensive. Well, serviced accommodation certainly is more labour intensive. But if you're prepared to put the work in, then prepared to, you might get the results back out.
Absolutely. So brilliant question from, who's just asked this one actually, let me just check. Okay, Maria's asked, so can an HMO strategy work from distance? For instance, if you live in London, thinking about doing an HMO elsewhere. Well, I'm going to answer that if that's okay, Maria, because I live about 20 miles south of Bristol. I'm way up in the Mendip Hills, so if Rick thinks he lives in the middle of nowhere, well, he should come out here, because we really do. My HMOs are down in Plymouth, which is about 130 miles from here, best part of 2 hours in the car, there or thereabouts. They absolutely can work, but effective management, good management is the key. We have a brilliant letting agent who works for us, manages our properties down there. He manages, I think, in the region of around about sort of 300, 350 rooms in total. He's highly systemised, and our HMOs sort of fit into his systemization very, very well. So if you're going to do HMOs from a distance, you do need to have people on the ground that are going to manage them for you. I don't think you could self-manage from several hours away. I think it would probably drive you a bit insane in terms of, viewing rooms and all those kind of things. Rick, would you agree on that one?
I would, and I think it is about the viewings really in the early stages. So when you've got a property that's empty, it's going to be very labour intensive to begin with when you're back into doing several viewings. Once it's occupied and once the tenants are in there, and then maybe now and again you get one empty room, that's not so bad. But to begin with, yes, absolutely. And I fully agree. If you can do it, absolutely can do it if you want to. I would say why first. So if you're in an area that perhaps doesn't lend itself to HMOs, then great. But if it does, then maybe you should start closer to home. But if not, then yes, you can do it remotely. Absolutely no issues with that. Get yourself a great manager. Don't try and work the price down with agents, because they're going to fill the rooms that offer the most returns to them first. So always make sure you get a manager that does specialise in HMOs. They understand the market and the legislation, and that way I have no problems with recommending people managing from afar. I think it will work, but only if you have to. I mean, always start closer to home if you've got that choice.
Yeah, okay, doke. So let's have lots of questions about finance. I think what we will do is we'll get a broker on the next one of these that we do to talk through HMO financing, because we are limited by time. I can't believe it. We've already been on this webinar this evening for an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, so just before we move on, there's quite a few people asking about en suites, Rick. I think it's a really, really interesting topic, this, because we can immediately imagine the appeal of renting to someone and they've got their own bathroom, they've got their own en suite. But there are a number of instances lately, and we're starting to hear rumblings that properties, HMOs with rooms which have got an en suite, could actually be classed as a sort of dwelling in their own right for council tax purposes. So it's very early days, this, and I'm sure it's something that you've heard and have started assessing as well, Rick. My thoughts on that are, it's not all about the ensuite. It's really not. And some of our best HMOs, in inverted comments, are actually 4 or 5 flats that we own in a building that are rented out, each of them rented out on a room by room basis with 2 people in them sharing a bathroom. Now, I don't think anybody's got a problem sharing a bathroom, living with one other person if they sort of get on reasonably well and are fairly like-minded. Rick, have you got any views on suites?
Yes, I have, and it is a really good question. It's quite topical at the moment. So I'll go through both sides of it. In my experience, the ensuite rooms we have, they fill quicker, and we can charge a premium for the ensuite. So we charge £50 a month more, and the tenants last longer. Because ensuite rooms are quite unique in my investing area. Not everybody has them. So I think I must have about 60, maybe 70 ensuite rooms, something like that, and then as many non-ensuite. Now, the non-ensuite rooms, yes, they do fill, but not quite as quickly as the ensuite rooms. So for me personally, yes, ensuites work better, but I also find that in our newer HMOs and our newer refurbishment properties, the ones that we're doing now to a much, much better standard to keep ourselves, and future-proof our business. You're right in what you're saying, Ant. They fill very quickly anyway with the shared bathroom. So the issues we've got at the moment, and there's a lot of, as you say, a lot of noise out on the market, that certain areas of the country have decided to single band for the terms of council tax properties that have got en suites in them. And I've also heard that that doesn't just necessarily mean properties with en suites. Some councils now have decided, or some valuation offices have decided, to single band properties that are separate dwellings, so separate ASTs. So there is no consistency, and some councils are doing it and some aren't. Now, when we started putting en suites, and I phoned our valuation office assistant and I asked the question, and this was a few years ago, and I said, look, if we put en suites in, will they be banded separately? And they said no, provided there's still an element of shared facilities. So that meant that if we left a shared kitchen, then they wouldn't be singly banding. So we're okay at the moment, but that's not to say that will change. And I know areas around the country are starting to do that. So the best advice that I can do is, before you decide, if you decide to put HMOs en suite, is call the VOA, the Valuation Office Assistant, and ask the question, and do it hypothetically. Just say, look, I'm interested in investing in HMOs. If I put an en suite in, will it be banded as a separate unit, or will it be just still part of the house? And see what they say. And I think really, be guided by your local authorities in terms of that. There doesn't seem to be any consistency throughout the country. And I'll give you another example. We've got the property I just showed you. It's let me go back to the slide, Ant, if it's okay, just very quickly. So this slide here, so you can see the very end property on the left-hand side as you look, and the property on the right-hand side. Now, these are two identical properties. They're both 6-bedroom, what we call Section 257 HMOs, but they are flats. For all intents and purposes, they're flats. Now, the one on the right-hand side is separately banded, which means that they're all Band A and the tenants pay their own council tax. The one on the left isn't separately banded, and I pay just one council tax for the whole property. Now, they are identical. Now, it's a bit of a quandary, really. So do I raise the balloon and say, well, you've got this wrong somewhere, for them to say, actually, yes, we have, and we're going to separately band your other property now? So I'm best really not saying anything at all. But that's how inconsistent it is. Does it bother the business? Does it affect it? Which, I think everybody really needs to know how we deal with it. Well, no, it doesn't. All we do on the property on the right-hand side is we charge it back to the tenant. So it's Band A, but they get a 25%, I think it's a 25% discount for single person living as well. So they end up paying about £65 a month, but they pay it themselves, and it's always fully occupied. So, we don't suffer the cost for that. We say, look, it is a great property. You've got your own ensuite. You've got a kitchenette as well in the room. So you have to pay a premium if you want to live in the property, which means that you have to pay your own council tax. So that's how we overcome that. I know there's lots of people and groups at the moment out there trying to challenge to say that you can't separately band if there's shared facilities. So it really is an emerging topic, and I'll be quite interested myself to see how it ends up. Absolutely.
So, wow, that was more time than we expected to spend on suites, wasn't it? So,
quite topical.
You're very, very, very topical question. Brilliant question. So, what we want to do now is, because I'm conscious of time, we're just going to give you a quick offer now for the next couple of minutes. And if you want to stay, please, please, please stay with us, because we've got loads more of your questions which we're going to answer. So, Rick runs a day where you can come along, you can find out more about the HMO business, how to how to create a successful HMO business, even if you're starting from scratch. Now, it's very, very different from anything else that you've probably ever seen. You might have been on other webinars before where people are selling courses and all that kind of stuff. This is a very, very different proposition. So, Rick, I don't know if we want to bring the slide up now and just talk us through the HMO Discovery Day, because I think we've covered a fair bit in an hour and 15 minutes, but we can only scratch the surface. Even if we're on here for another, say, 30-40 minutes, there's only so much we can cover in this. And also, it's a little bit out of context because people are sat at home, they're not going round an HMO and viewing an HMO and looking at floor plans and looking at those kind of things. There's only so much we can cover now. So tell us about the HMO Discovery Day, and then we're going to do a very, very special offer for anybody who's on here. And I mean it. If you genuinely want to learn about HMOs and you want to do so without breaking the bank, please stay with us just for the next few minutes. So you've been running this for a little while now. They're quite small groups that you have in a room. So we're not talking about, 200 people sat in a room. These are quite intensive days, aren't they?
Yeah, so we've been running these now for quite a while. Now, we only do a maximum in this area of 50 people. So we've got a group of 50 really motivated people that really want to learn more about the HMO strategy. So the next one we've got is on the 21st of May, and we cover everything you need to know about HMOs. So we go through the due diligence process that we spoke about earlier, finding your area and making sure that the deal stacks, etc. We cover licensing. We cover how to negotiate your deals correctly. We cover what's called Article 4 planning direction and how to apply for planning if you need it. We cover how to find deals. We cover how to deal direct with vendors, so you can bypass the agent and deal direct with the person that owns a property, how to write your documentation, how to obtain a HMO license, how to work with a building team for your refurbs, how to refurbish your property to the required standard, how to make sure you're totally compliant. And that's really, really important. So we really go into a lot of detail on how to make sure that you are completely ethical and completely compliant and safe. Because what we do is we teach people how to become responsible and safe landlords and landladies. We teach people how to attract the best tenants, and that future-proofs your business going forwards. How to manage your tenants as well. So when you've got tenants in the property, you know what's the best thing that you can do if a tenant misses a payment, and how to work around that. How to grow and scale your portfolio, and how to get your money back out of the deal. So if you're looking for below market value properties, what the best strategies you can use to get your money back out, like the case study that we did at the very beginning, and how to become as passive as you can with HMOs. We cover a lot about marketing. We touch on mindset, and mindset, you know, with everybody is sometimes it's quite a big thing to overcome. You know, I don't know, what if I get it wrong? What if the market crashes? What if I can't find any money? What if it all, you know, what if it just doesn't work for me? So we do an awful lot about mindset and how to overcome your self-limiting beliefs. We talk a lot about education into the housing law and the Housing Act, how to evict non-paying tenants, and when not on this particular course, but then going forwards from there, we also offer live monthly webinars as well to touch on any topic that people want to cover. So, and we cover so much more on the day, Ant. I mean, it really is packed with information, and it is, you know, we could probably put everything that we do on the day in a 3-day course, but we put it all in one day to offer really, really good value, and including a hot buffet lunch. You know, we're discounting this at the moment to £35 per person.
Rick, there's going to be a lot of people saying 35 quid, you know, like that's what the cost of going out for a pizza these days, isn't it? It's not a lot of money. So why is he doing it? And I think what we want to do is utter transparency. Rick's a really, really honourable guy. I've known him for a number of years now. We wouldn't invite him onto this webinar to sort of share this stuff with us without, you know, really knowing that he's a good guy, entirely transparent. Well, the truth is, Rick, that, you know, you've had quite a few people who've come along to these days. They learn all about HMOs. They learn exactly how to do it. They know what to do, and then maybe they go away and think, do you know what, this doesn't quite work in my area, or do you know what, I've got a busy career, I'm a pilot, I'm a doctor, I'm a whatever, you know, and maybe those people might choose to invest some of their money with Rick. So full transparency here. You're not here to you're not running the day to sort of fish for investors or anything like that. It really is genuinely for people to be able to find out how your HMO business works, and then to be able to take that and almost as a sort of cookie cutter model, transpose it across to their own areas. And I know when people are starting out, it's really daunting actually, when myself really well, but when you start looking at your area and trying to figure out, well, you know, what is happening in the HMO market in my area, do you help people, you know, gain the tools to make that kind of assessment as to, does their area work? Which kind of, you know, which sort of market should they be operating in?
We absolutely do, Ant. Yes. So, you know, when we talk about stacking the deal and doing due diligence on the day, we teach people what to look for, where to look, and how to stack their deal in terms of supply and demand, how much money they should be paying for the property, etc. So we help everybody with building the business up from the ground upwards, and making sure that we future-proof the business going forward. I just have very quickly noticed a lot of people are asking the location for the course. So the location for the Discovery Day on the 21st of May is in Worcester, which is it's just off Junction 6 off the M5. And it's held in a hotel called the Pear Tree. So it's very close to Worcester Rugby Club. So it's Junction 6 off the M5, which is really easy to access, and loads and loads of parking, folks, as well. So free parking too.
Okay. Now we keep telling Rick, come on, Rick, let's move it somewhere civilized, shall we? Let's move it to the centre of London or centre of Birmingham, and rightly so. He says, hang on a minute, and I'm running it for 35 quid. I'm running it in my own backyard. They can come to me for 35 quid. So I think that's a fair enough comment, and also it's in your area, isn't it, Rick? You can kind of look out the window and point at properties and areas that you invested in, and you can describe the local area, and people really get a feel for how your HMO business works. So I know we said we kind of max out at 50 people on the day. I know some of those tickets have been pre-sold, and before we came on the webinar this evening, we sold about 25 of them. So there's about 25 spaces left. It's going to be less than that now, because some of you, whilst I've been wittering away here, will have used that link that I've just sent to everybody and gone ahead and booked your space at the next event. We don't run these all the time, Rick, do they? It's not something that we're doing every week. I've been extremely privileged to go along and find out a lot about Rick's HMO business, and actually take a lot of what he does and transpose it into my own HMO portfolio as well. So I would urge you to do the same. So Rick, whilst we've got this page up here, I wonder what your thoughts are on the biggest mistakes that some people make when they're looking at HMOs. You must have seen, hundreds, dozens, hundreds of people who've sort of come into the HMO market with some preconceived ideas. And what are the common mistakes that people make in your experience?
I think a lot of people, in my experience, and more recently, have gone on to buy properties without knowing the legislation. And without mentioning any names, somebody came to me probably about a month ago and said, look, they've got a property, it's been converted, they've spent about £45,000 on a refurb, they've just had it inspected, and unfortunately it's failed its inspection because the rooms were too small, or some of them, not all of them, and the fire alarm system they installed wasn't adequate. So in effect, really now, they're going to have to go back and either redesign this property completely or sell it. And that is, it's a huge, huge mistake. And had they have come to the right people and been educated, if you like, with the legislation, then they wouldn't have made that mistake. So I think at the moment, the biggest mistake is knowing the legislation, knowing that the legislation is actually about to change, and future-proofing the model based on that legislation, because it does change all the time. And I think room sizes are probably the biggest mistake people make at the moment. So they'll take a property on either as a rent-to-rent or maybe as a lease purchase, and they won't be able to use that property going forward because the rooms are actually not compliant to the minimum room standards. So I think, to answer your question in a nutshell, Ant, it would be that people don't know the legislation and potentially are putting themselves at risk by spending an awful lot of money and losing that money by having properties that aren't to current standard.
Yeah, okay. I mean, actually, even tonight on the webinar, we've had a few people saying, well, I applied for a buy-to-let mortgage, and then when the mortgage offer came back, it said, not to be used as a house in multiple occupation. And I think, crikey, that is, that happens. People don't necessarily get the best advice when they're starting out. They think, well, you know what, I'll go for the cheapest mortgage product with the smallest deposit. And there are some fairly serious consequences, actually, if you are renting out a property as an HMO on a mortgage product which isn't designed for HMOs. Without wishing to scare anyone tonight, the consequences can be sort of fairly severe, really. So not using the right finance products, not having the right insurances in place. I think the biggest mistake I see some people make is they they use a letting agent to rent the property as an HMO, and that letting agent isn't a specialist in HMOs. They just, they might be managing 200, 300 single let properties, but they don't manage HMOs, but they say, yeah, we can do that. Actually, they're not set up to do it at all. And what you end up with is a lot of sort of vacant rooms, a lot of voids, because you've just chosen the wrong agent from the outset. So I would urge caution when you're looking at finding the right agent. You need to make sure they've got a proven track record in managing HMOs, managing these types of properties. How do you know that? Can you talk to some of their existing landlords? What kind of due diligence can you do on them? Can you look at some of the properties that they're managing at the moment? So, Rick, I don't know if you'd agree that it sounds fundamental advice, doesn't it? But it really is very important.
It is absolutely important, and I think I touched earlier and I said that if you are going to take an agent on, make sure that you don't try and beat them down on price, because agents work on commission, and if they've got lots of empty rooms and they've got clients that are paying them 10, 15, or probably not that much, but 10 or 12%, and you go in and say, well, look, you can have my portfolio, but you can have it at 7%, well, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to work out whose rooms they're going to fill first. So, there's that to consider too. But, HMOs are, there's lots and lots of consideration in terms of legislation and planning, etc., that you need to be aware of. And as Ant just pointed out, that not all agents are, in fact, aware of that. So it's very important that you know yourself so you don't breach. And at the end of the day, if your name is on the license, then it will be you that's ultimately responsible if anything goes wrong at the property, even if you have it under an agent. So, getting the law and the legislation right to begin with is fundamental.
Yeah, we've got lots of people asking about other dates. I think it would be fair to say that at the moment we don't have any other dates that are bookable right now in the diary. So we are gearing up towards the 21st of May one. If we overbook on that, if we get too many people book on that, then what we'll try and do is to find alternate dates for people. I would urge you to act fast, because there's 500 people on this webinar this evening, registered on this webinar this evening. We will probably replay it again tomorrow for some people who missed it, so those spaces will have gone. I don't like the sort of scarcity sale tactics that are sometimes used in webinars. We're just trying to be completely honest with you. We wouldn't want you to sort of think, oh, I'll do that at the weekend, and you come to book it at the weekend, and guess what? It's booked, or maybe you've forgotten about it. So I would urge you to sort of, it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But take action, do it now. I got this, weirdly, whilst we were online, Rick, I got this sort of message, sort of, not a message, but sort of, is it called a meme? Where you get like a sort of picture with some words on it, flash up on my phone, and it just seemed really apt, because it says, I'll read it out to you now. It says, I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm telling you it's going to be worth it. Now, when we talk about the amount of money that can be made in HMOs, and my HMOs average around about, give or take, there or thereabouts, around about £1,000 per month per property, after all of the running costs. So it's around about that. Sometimes it's £700, sometimes it's £1,300, but it's around about £1,000 a month. Buying these places and assessing it and getting them up and running, it's not easy. I'll tell you what is easy. Not doing it is easy. That's the easiest thing in the world. We all know this, don't we? We all know that, not doing anything, talking yourself out of doing anything is the easiest route. But we're not here to make it, to tell you it's easy. There's going to be a bit of pain up front. There's going to be a bit of hard work. But the thing about properties, if we do this right, we work up front and they pay us forever. Nothing's entirely passive. We don't, we never have to, it's not a case of we never have to answer the phone again, but we can systemize these businesses. We can use the right agents in place. We can use the right systems, so that actually, when you compare it to, in inverted commas, work, it's not a lot of work by comparison. So, Rick, the kind of people that come on the one-day event, are they? Is there such a thing as a sort of typical attendee? Is it sort of people just starting out, or people kind of restarting their property journey?
Yeah, I mean, we are looking for people that we can help, begin their property journey and build, their business from the ground upwards. So, but we do also get people on the courses that have one, maybe two HMOs that we can help, make them more passive and help, the cash flow of the business a lot stronger and a lot easier for them to work in. So it doesn't really matter if people have got one or two HMOs already, then that's absolutely fine. But generally, a lot of people come along that haven't got an awful lot of experience and are just looking for that guide and that, sort of hand holding, if you like, to be able to move forwards with their journey. Just want to point out, Ant, if that's okay, that a couple of people are coming back saying, the date is wrong on the ticket. So we sold an awful lot of tickets this evening, but a couple of people are saying it says that the date is incorrect. So folks, I can confirm it is on the 21st of May. If your ticket says anything different, don't worry, I'll get onto that now, but it is the 21st of May, folks.
It's just a system error, so don't worry about that. We know we're booking in May. Don't worry, we're not booking onto the April event that you've now missed, so don't panic about that. So okay, cool. So Rick, what's next for your property business? What's next in your journey? Because you built a big portfolio. It's pretty systemized. Where do you see it going next? Is it more of these bigger deals?
Yeah, I think now we're looking for properties that are around about £700,000 upwards. I mean, we won't discount any properties that come along that really cash flow very well, but we're kind of looking for the bigger deal at the moment where we can get our money back out, and we're looking for legacy now for our family. So I mentioned our reason why earlier, and that's for my son Ben, and we just need to make sure that we are future proofing now, so when we're not here, then our kids hopefully will be looked after and will never have to work, because not only will they have the residual income that the HMOs bring, they will also have hopefully lots of equity in trust that they can call on anytime they want to from the properties that we own.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. So Roger's just messaged us in, Rick, to say, Roger Woodall, it said, been on the course, been on it, brilliant course. So good third-party endorsement for you as well. So thank you for your feedback there, Roger. I hope you can see this evening. We try and give as much information as we possibly can. Tonight is more about giving a heads up of what to be aware of if you're moving into the HMO game, HMO business, and just what the opportunities really are out there, because they are massive for those people who do want to do it, who do want to take action. So, Rick, when you look back on your property journey, and you were kind of an excited, sort of dewy-eyed, however old you were, guy, when you moved into HMOs, I won't put a number in there. How were things different to how you'd learned, to how you expected them to be?
I think I was quite surprised to begin with how easy it was. So that sounds awful, but I was really, I had the what ifs, what if it goes wrong and I'm using somebody else's money? It's a massive responsibility. What if I lose it, and what if I can't get that back? And I think very quickly after we did the first deal, it became very apparent that it works really well providing you do it properly. So I think all of those not rumors, but those sort of a little annoying noises in my head were dispelled quite quickly. Would I do anything differently now? I think I would probably have invited more people into deals. Maybe we would have had more property now than we had then. We became quite systemized very early on, so we kind of became as passive as we could. We manage our own portfolio. We've got staff now that do it as well for us, but I think I realized very quickly that we were creating something really good, and I needed to get the systems in very quickly to be able to cope with that. So we did that at a very early stage. So the only thing I would do differently now really would probably maybe be a little bit more aggressive in the marketing and invite more people into the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've got a friend of mine, and you'll know him, but I won't name any names on the webinar tonight. And he's got about 500 HMO rooms. It's probably more than that now, but at the time he had around about 500, and he had created a monster for himself. He hadn't systemized any of it. He was actually going around and collecting a lot of the rent in cash with his dog on a Friday. So sort of wandering about the streets with 20,000-30,000 pounds in cash at any one time. And he said to me, I said, this is some business he's got. He said, yeah, do you know what? I've done it all wrong on reflection. It's been great from a financial point of view, but it's killing me. I can't take any time off. You manage your properties, but I know you're a big fan of the of systemization. So do you get time off? Is this a 24/7 business for you?
No, absolutely not. No, because of the property journey that we've been on, we've kind of spiraled into lots of other different businesses now that we can help other people, with their property journey. But in terms of my main property portfolio, I've got staff now that are on the ground almost on a daily basis, and I don't really have an awful lot of contact with them. So hours that I actually put in running the property portfolio, if I'm totally honest, I would say, less than 20 hours a week.
Okay.
And we've got over 120 units now, so we are very, very systemized in what we do.
Yeah. Okay, so this is not about creating a monster job for yourself. It is about getting it right and creating that passive income. Rick, you've kind of mentioned your reason why. Mine is very much aligned with yours. I've got a young family. I've got twins. They're 7 now, but I kind of started in HMOs when they were just born, really, and I wanted to be there as a dad. I've got when I do the sort of school run. I'm one of maybe 2 dads that actually turn up, to 2 or 3 dads that are actually there, picking the kids up from school, taking them to the after school clubs or taking them to the park or whatever. I consider myself very fortunate. That is not the same as saying I'm really lucky, because you do create your own luck to a certain degree, and there is quite a lot of hard work up front. So it's not going to be easy, but it is totally worth it. So just a little update. With loads of you have messaged in saying that you booked tickets, which is fantastic. We've just checked on the system. We have 8 left, literally 8 left for the date on the 21st. A few of you are saying you can't make it. We don't have any other dates booked in at this stage. I'm sure we will, but right now we don't have any other dates booked in. So please keep an eye out for emails from us or future webinars if you really, really can't make it. If it's anything you can possibly move, even if it's your own wedding, you could move it a week, maybe. Might be a little unpopular with your JV partner in that one, but anyway. But if you can, yeah, please come along on the 21st of May. We really look forward to seeing you there. You've had some ringing endorsements from some other people on the call, as well as myself, having been along and found out so much more about Rick's HMO business. So we're going to run out of time now, Rick. We've been on an hour and 45 minutes. Time literally flies. We hope we've covered as many of your questions as we possibly can this evening. I would urge you to, if you've had a question tonight and you don't feel we've covered it well, write it down, bring it along to the day, bring it along to the Discovery Day. It's very interactive. You can ask lots of questions. You can write them up on the board and make sure that we come back and cover those through the course of the day. So I hope to see you there. What we're going to do is we are going to say thank you and good night in a few minutes' time, but we're going to leave the webinar running for about another 3 or 4 minutes, just with that link there. So the link, if you haven't clicked on it, is yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/Gannon. That's Rick's surname. So yourpropertynetwork.co.uk/Gannon, and you can book on at the £35 price. You can't book it at that price anywhere else. So that is genuinely the case. So we hope we'll see you there. We hope you found the webinar useful this evening. I want to say 2 lots of thanks. Firstly is to Rick for joining this evening, sharing his experience with us, looking at that £1 million property with the 28 flats. How can we not be inspired to go out and do do the same. This stuff is real. I've been in property for over a decade now. Myself, I've interviewed well over 800, maybe 900 property investors who are out there doing it. This stuff is real. It does work. From my point of view, it totally beats the 9-to-5 day job. I hope to never, I will never go back. So massive thanks to Rick for sharing his experience this evening. And finally, thank you to you for joining us. We hope you found it useful, interesting, inspiring, informative. We're very aware that this is the time that, quite often you might be just putting your feet up and relaxing, or spending time with family or loved ones or whoever. So we hope you found it useful, and we hope that we see you on the 21st. So from me, Ant Lyons, thank you and good evening.
Thank you, Ant.